That happens, but I've had women answer the door without clothes on.
Welcome to Talking Texas Real Estate, coming to you from the Iron Room at Rock One Realty. Today our guest is Jeremy Baskett with Baskett Valuations. Jeremy, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Braz, it's good to be here. How are you today?
Good. It's good to see you. We just had a PRAD class that we had opened up to the community. You kind of played a pivotal role in that by sending us some stats. Can you talk a little bit about what it is that you do, how that kind of stuff with PRAD and your home valuations and those kind of things all kind of coincide together? Sure.
Well, I think background is I'm a real estate appraiser, right? So I'm heavily involved in real estate transactions in the Panhandle, and when it comes to taxes, there's always a lot of questions, right? These new assessed values that come out every spring and rock people's world in a lot of ways. We look at those, we see those every day, and sometimes we help folks protest those, and sometimes we tell them they shouldn't protest. And so we just really follow the market and do a whole lot of analysis in the local market. And so, those kinds of things that we do allow us to help people from time to time and communicate with guys like you who are trying to get the word out about what's going on with PRAD and those kinds of issues. So
a lot of times we'll get clients, past clients, people that will just call our office wanting to talk to us about the assessed value from PRAD. And of course, as realtors, we can run CMAs, we can do RPRs, we can do things like that for them. What is it that you do that's different if someone were to call you and say, hey, I need you to look at my assessed value on my taxes?
Sure. I bet the question you get a lot is, can I really sell my house for that?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, we do similar things like CMAs and things like that. The interesting part about the PRAD values is that they are valued as of December 31st of the previous year. So like in this case, December 31st, 2024 is what PRAD used as a date to value your property. So we look at the market retrospectively from there to see if there's sales in the neighborhood that would support a lower assessed value, do things like that. We run the CMAs. We look at patterns, in real estate, in neighborhoods, in sections, in any way you can break it down to say there was X amount of increase or X amount of decrease in this area year over year, and then, take those macros and apply them down, and then we can get more personal to the actual property that we're looking at to help maybe change the assessed value.
That's good. So I know one of the things that you had sent us was the different zones, like the 100, 200, sure, 300 zone, and then each one of those zones outside of the city limits. And sure, just on a personal note, ours fell into a category that over the past year had shown, according to your numbers, to have gone down like 10% or something like that.
The zone overall.
Mm-hmm,
yes.
The zone overall. So how does that work? Because I know obviously not every house in our zone decreased 10%.
Sure.
But there are certain houses that do. So how do you make those determinations?
Right. So when you think about it, every piece of real estate is unique, right? There are substitutes out there in a way, but they aren't the exact same substitute in the exact same location. So, those macros are really a good feel for what's going on in a larger area. And the great thing about Amarillo and our local multiple listing system is that we are broken down into different ways, areas and zones, neighborhoods, if you will, and zones. And so we're segregated in this northwest, southeast, southwest, northeast kind of, with I-40 and I-27 intersecting. We have those naturally occurring in our community. So we can take those macros and look at those and go, well, this zone went up 10%, but this zone only went up 2%. And then let's take this wide approach and let's narrow it down, and then let's focus in on one property. And that is the property that we're looking at that we may feel has been overassessed. I had someone call me last week and say, my house went up $200,000. How can that happen? And I said, I don't know, but let's dig into it, And so, we're going to do that. And so we take these large patterns that are going on, these macros in the economy and in these areas, and then we look at that, and it gives us a feel for what's going on. But then we continue to dig deeper and deeper, and then we do a more personal CMA type situation. And if we look at that and say there's grounds for an appraisal that might change an assessment, then at that point, we decide with the client, do we want to push forward with this? And I think you guys probably are doing that service in a way for free with some of your clients and saying, hey, I think you may have a shot here of protesting this.
Right.
So,
and we tell people that all the time too. So when they call us, because I know that our CMAs, RPRs, the things that we're running, not on the detailed scale that you do one out, just from seeing some of the things that you do in your valuations. But that's good. So if someone has a question, you kind of start wide, you narrow it down to their house, and then kind of go from that.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of statistical ways to use those macro data, those larger sets. You can do regression analysis and things like that help provide adjustments for differences between properties. And so sometimes those larger sets of data tell the details of like, how much is a garage stall worth in a neighborhood? It might tell you what the price per square foot you should adjust comparables versus a subject as. It gives you those kinds of data that you can use, plus your market knowledge, and so that's where we maybe approach it a little differently than maybe a realtor would. We have those metrics that we drill down a little more precisely with, if you will.
Right, exactly. So, and that kind of leads me into my next question. So here at Rock One, we're a training brokerage. We have a lot of new agents. One of the questions they always ask is when we're running these CMAs, and it always seems like the first CMA they ever run is on something that I've never seen before. It's I don't even know, a 6-bedroom, 3-bath house on 2.5 acres, or whatever, with shop and, all kinds of different things. And there's nothing in that certain zone or within, a couple of miles, 2 or 3 mile radius to compare it to of anything that's ever closed. So one of the most common questions is, well, then what do I do? How far do I go out, or where can I go to find a comparable property on that?
Right.
What would your answer to that question be?
Well, I think every property is unique, right? But you get something weird like a 6-bedroom home. Well, how many 6 bedrooms are there? One, not very many. How many families need a 6-bedroom? Probably not very many. And if that is your criteria, then, you may be able to expand that pretty far to find another 6-bedroom home. And you ask yourself, would the market allow you to, or would the market substitute this property for that one? Is it in the same school district? Parents that need 6 bedrooms, they probably care about what school district they're in.
Right.
There are things like that you look at to say, can I go this far to use this property? And sometimes expanding distance and expanding time backwards, those are things we use all the time to find something that will justify a unique property.
That's good. So, and sitting here and talking to you, you're obviously very knowledgeable, and we've had many conversations about stuff before. But just for our listeners or people watching right now, to get to know you a little bit better, how long have you been doing this? Kind of how did you get into doing assessments, valuations, things like that, get into the appraiser world? Sure.
So I kind of have a unique story, I guess. I mean, everyone's story is unique as to how they got to where they are, right? My family has a real estate background. I grew up in the local rental market. My family owned a bunch of rentals, and mostly in Northwest Amarillo, and maybe, some neighborhoods that are a little tougher than others and that kind of stuff. But started around 12 years old. My dad and granddad decided that I was going to be working. And so here we go. So I get dropped off on the corner in the neighborhood with a gas can and a lawnmower and a weed eater, and here we go. I start mowing properties and doing these things and cleaning out after tenants left and doing all these things that weren't fun. And, you know, my granddad would roll around about noon and he'd have a hamburger and a Coke, and he'd sit down with me and he'd give me a list of addresses and say, this is your afternoon. And then I would push the lawnmower 3 blocks down the street, you know, while people are honking at me and giving me a hard time and that kind of stuff. So I grew up in it, I guess is the best way to say it. But after college, I was heading in a different direction. I thought I was going to be in marketing. I had a job set up that way and some different stuff. And actually a realtor that lived in Dalhart that I had gone to college with had just happened to mention my name to an appraiser. And this is back before cell phones. This is like 1998. Right. So I guess cell phones existed, but you know, we couldn't use them. We couldn't afford them.
Hey, I'm prior to cell phones too.
Right,
so
right.
I get it.
Okay, yeah. So what was going on there? This appraiser had called my grandparents' house looking for me because, of course, my name wasn't listed in the phone book. I was 22, right? You know, so he calls and my granddad gives him the right number, and then he calls me and he says, "Hey, I'm looking to have someone help me in the appraisal business." And I said, well, I mean, I'll talk to you. I don't know. I've kind of got this marketing gig lined up, and it was by the grace of God that honestly that stuff kind of fell into place. And so I interviewed with him, and then I called another appraiser I knew in town that I went to church with, and I said, hey, this guy Bob, he's asking me to work for him. What do you think? And he goes, what are you talking about? You're lying. And I said, no, I'm telling you the truth. He says, he called you and asked you to work? And I said, yeah. He said, you got to take the job. He said, nobody gets in this business. Like, it's impossible to get into unless you're family. And you need to look at that very seriously and take the job. So, you know, I was at the right place at the right time. And I mean, truly do give God credit for that. I had nothing to do with it, but here I am today, 27 years later. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you started in 1998, never looked back, never did anything any different.
It's my only real job after college, if you can believe that.
That's great.
So yeah, that's how long I've been doing it.
When did you start Baskett?
So I worked for a couple of years with Bob, and Bob still kind of fell apart. He was retiring. It was kind of a strange time, and he had sold his company. And so the other appraiser I'd gone to church with, Jerry Evans, I called him and I said, hey, this is getting kind of wonky over here. You know, could you help me out here? And he said, come on over. And he goes, this is about spring break. I can't remember if it was, I think spring break, maybe 2000. He called me and said, he said, just come on over. He said, if you work for me for the next 3 days straight, I mean 24 hours a day, because I'm taking my kids out of town for spring break on a volleyball trip, and I've got all of these properties we have to get appraised and done. He goes, then you can have a job. So sure enough, I slept on the couch at the office for a few hours, and I got back up, started doing more appraisals and doing the paperwork and all the things that we have to do with appraisals. And we worked for about 60 plus hours straight. He went on vacation. I slept for 2 days after that, and had the job after that. So I worked with him for a long time, almost 15, 16 years. And at the end of 2016, it was just time for a change. And, you know, I was almost 40 years old, and I decided I need to start my own firm, and left with that blessing and started my own firm and kind of never looked back. So
you were Jerry for 15 years?
Roughly, yeah, somewhere in there.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, and Tara and I both knew Jerry. Good guy.
Great guy. Yeah. He's you couldn't say a negative word about Jerry. You know what I mean? He was a great mentor. He looked at things completely differently than anybody else in the world did. And if you got to know him, he was such a character that you could tell that. Very smart, but total mess, if you know what I mean.
Right. I think that's probably why my wife liked him so much. He was kind of an outside the box guy. Just kind of a quick side note story with Jerry.
Sure.
He Well, long story on our house. We were having issues with our first lender, switched lenders, and Jerry did a ton of his own research and digging through things to find comps for our new lender to get us approved on our loan. And that was kind of a stressful thing. And Jerry came in, of course, way outside the box on everything. And he showed us these different comps and all of these things that he had found.
Yeah.
But just a good guy to be able to do that.
He was a great guy. He was kind of a local legend. He sort of invented rush appraisals, if you will, like helping lenders and people. That was his passion, to do those kinds of things, helping people. And he did a great job with that, and I learned a lot from him. And just the other day, that same kind of situation happened with me. I had a realtor call and say, "Hey, I've got a house in Canyon. We're with a Rocket Mortgage. Full disclosure, if you're looking for a good mortgage company, that's not my favorite. There's a lot of red tape there and some things that go on that just make transactions tougher. So I'm always plugging the local lenders with those kinds of things. But realtor called and said, "Hey, I've had this appraiser out, and we've missed this property by $10,000, and I don't understand how. I can't understand it." And I said, "Well, what's the situation?" And she said, "It was on the market. We got 3 offers in 48 hours, one of these kind of deals, and I think I had it priced right." And I said, "Okay, well," I didn't ask who the appraiser was. I just said, "Well, who are they with?" And she said, "Rocket." And I said, "Well, what if we just switched lenders? What if we looked at this a little differently? Would the buyer be willing to switch lenders?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Here are 2 of my favorites." I said, "I'll put you in contact with whichever one you choose." And she chose one. I said, "Okay." So we emailed the lender. I said, "This deal is about to fall apart. They need to close fast. If you want to work this up with them, and you can get the appraisal to me, I'll have it done in 24 hours. I'm not promising a value here, but I'm telling you that we can relook at this, and this might just save your deal." And sure enough, we went to a local lender. 24 hours later, the appraisal was done. It did appraise for the sales price, and we moved on, and that person was able to close. So those are the kinds of things that I did learn from Jerry. He was in the people serving business, and that's part of what my whole game is too.
That's good.
Yeah.
Same thing with us. We preach that all the time. And kind of that you talked about helping people. What is the most rewarding part of the job that you do now?
That's I think one of the best things about the job is knowing that if I wasn't a part of this transaction, it might not have happened. Knowing that I went the extra mile, wherever that was, to figure out, to take the time to think outside the box, to find a solution that other people might not find a solution to. And that goes back to some of these regression analysis and these macro things that we do. And how can we take one property and look at it a number of different ways? And what is the market telling us about this property? Well, 3 contracts, for instance, on this last house in 24 hours tells you, hey, this is a highly marketable property. It's a property that everybody wants. It's in a price range that everybody wants. So let's go back out to our macro set and let's look at it, and let's look for any intricacies, any nuances that might be in that, and see if there's a way that we can make some appropriate market-based adjustments that would help solidify this deal. And so that's sometimes what I do as an appraiser, to look at things a little differently than others might. If you're just in a rut and you're just, oh, here's the next property and I'm going to trudge through this and I'm going to get it done. And I love putting it in automatic mode and going. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it, but sometimes it takes just a minute for you to step back and think about something a little differently, look at the metrics just a little differently, and see if there's another way to help facilitate something happening. And that's the greatest satisfaction, knowing that somebody got the house of their dreams. A lender, my client, was able to make a loan that they needed and wanted to make. And my fiduciary responsibility was to the lender, and I did take care of them, and I gave them a fair market-based appraisal, and they were able to close. And so helping people and knowing that happens is great. It's just really rewarding. And I think that's probably just part of my competitive nature in a way. I was
going to ask that question next.
Yeah, I think that's something that, growing up and being in sports and doing things like that, it's in your blood. And when sports are over and you've moved on, what's next? And so that competitiveness kind of, for me, just sort of fell into work.
Right.
And so I want to be able to outwork anybody. I want to be able to do more than anybody else. I want to be able to do a better job than anybody else. And that's just, it's a very part of how I'm driven, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You do commercial and residential appraisals?
Yes.
Is there, I guess, a twofold question? Difference between the two of them, and which one do you enjoy doing more?
So when you talk about real estate being unique, commercial is a whole different animal from residential. You really do have to come up with some interesting solutions and ways to look at property, because there's, first of all, so many less transactions that occur, and then secondarily, they're just more complex. Residential appraisals are primarily based on these forms that the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, give you to fill out and use to develop an appraisal. Well, in a commercial situation, you're looking at writing a narrative type report that you create start to finish. And so those are certainly much more challenging, much more complex and interesting. But, I love both of them. I don't know that I would say choose one over the other.
Good.
Commercial certainly much more time consuming.
Yeah, no, just had you do one for me. And it was probably one of oh man, there's just a lot to that one.
Yeah.
What are some of the common misconceptions that people in general or realtors may have about what appraisers do, what you do specifically?
I'm not sure what the common misconceptions are. I think, maybe being afraid to communicate with an appraiser might be something that there's a misconception about. Appraisers are people, first of all, just like you and me and realtors. We're all people, and we're all in this together trying to figure out, does this real estate, this property here, does this work for everyone is the best way to say it. And so being able to visit as a realtor, being able to visit with an appraiser, I think is important. I think that the realtor should understand that the appraiser can't tip his hat in any way towards what the value might be, or really discuss the value. And that's part of our professional standards that we follow. But we ought to be able to exchange ideas about data and comparables and things like that, and the unique features of a home. I think all those things may some realtors may be shy about reaching out and saying, hey, I've got these 18 things that this house has that make it super insulated, or these are luxury floors that we flew in from wherever, things like that there that you can communicate, I think, to an appraiser, and that should be received.
Trying to figure out how to word this and it be okay, because it is kind of taboo. So, and you and I had kind of talked about
Sure.
this before, coming into real estate, man, that's almost been 6 years ago for me now, 7 years ago for my wife, but I was still part of the brokerage then, but it was kind of a taboo subject. Can you call the appraiser? Do you not call the appraiser? What can you do and not do? And I guess the majority of the times that it kind of becomes an issue is if we have the seller, we've run our comps, again, not as detailed as an appraiser comps, but we kind of feel like we have it priced correctly, but it comes in 5,000 low, or 7,500 low from the appraiser. Is it at that point okay for us in our profession, to be able to call the appraiser and say, hey, would you consider here are the 3 comps I ran. I noticed that 2 of the ones that I ran weren't in your evaluation, if that were the case. Is that something that we can say, hey, Jeremy, would you mind considering these other comps, and that be an okay conversation to have?
So I think that's an okay conversation, but I think if you feel like up front that there's maybe going to be an issue, that you should reach out prior to. And some of the things are changing.
I like that you just said that. Reach out prior to. So
absolutely.
You're saying that that's okay to do.
That would be my preference, is to have a conversation with you before I've submitted it and signed my name and said, hey, this is the value. And then you come in and go, well, is it? Not that I mind being challenged or asked a question, but the thing going on in particularly in residential mortgage right now is that there's these reconsideration of value. So reconsideration of value is a thing that a lender can ask, but with the new regulations from Fannie Mae, who govern residential mortgage, if you will, the only person who can actually, from a transactional side, that can ask for a reconsideration of value now is the buyer side. So seller can't do that. So property comes in low, seller can't go to the lender there, to the buyer's lender, and say, hey, we have this data, can you look at it? It can only come if the buyer requests that. And so then all of a sudden you're scrambling and needing to work with the buyer's agent, who may not want to work with you on that if the value is lower. And the truth is, they may want to work with you too, because you guys are all have the same goal, is to get this deal closed and get the fair price for it. So prior to is always the best, in my opinion.
That's good. So everybody hear that? He said prior to, and that realtors, it is okay to call.
I think once you hear the inspection has been set, if you have a list of data, if you have a list of something that you want to provide it at the inspection on the kitchen room counter table, or send the email, or do whatever it is. But any data that you may have that might be pertinent to the transaction, it should be at that time.
That's good.
Yeah,
I appreciate you being willing to do that and talking about it
sure.
on here. So switching gears just a little bit.
Okay.
Let's move to Jeremy Baskett, the person.
Okay.
Wife, kids, what you like doing outside of work?
Yeah. So Jeremy Baskett, I won't tell you how old I am, but I graduated
before cell phones.
Right. It was before cell phones.
And you weren't in the phone book.
I wasn't in the phone book, but I graduated Amarillo High in 1994. So that'll give you some indication there. And we can, if you guys like math out there, go for it. I don't care. But went on to school and got a degree in marketing, and came back to Amarillo. Like I said, jumped right into real estate. And these days I've got a wife and 3 kids. We've got a 15-year-old, 2 12-year-olds, and I'm either
busy.
Yeah, I used to play golf, and I love that, but it doesn't seem like I get to play much anymore, and that's frustrating. But this is a unique time in life for us. Yeah, I'm either at a soccer tournament, a tennis tournament, or watching Parker cheerlead. It's always something. So yeah, we're on the go all the time, and unfortunately out of town on the road with these traveling teams and things like that. It's eating up all our time. But that's me in a nutshell, and what I'm up to these days from a personal standpoint.
It seems like traveling sports has become a much bigger deal than it was when I was growing up and in athletics and sports, playing stuff like that. It seems like now we talk to a ton of people, and they're out of town in Dallas for this, or out of town in Oklahoma City, or whatever, traveling with sports.
It seems like it's like at a pinnacle right now. It's like, well, you can't hardly play local league anymore in a lot of ways. Like if whether it's baseball or soccer or whatever it is. For us, our 12-year-old Knox plays soccer, and he's got us everywhere. I mean, from Denver to Fort Worth to, you name it, Oklahoma City for sure, Tulsa. We've been all kinds of places, and it's worth it to do it for the kids. It's a window in time that we'll never get back. So. Exactly. We're doing that, and we may cuss under our breath about it a little bit here and there. And, not this weekend. I may get home at midnight. I don't know. We'll see on Sunday. So, and up and at them again on Monday. But that's just part of life. And we're investing in our kids and trying to steer them in the right direction. And that's been my main focus as personally, really, over the last few years here. So it's good.
It's good. That is good. So how do you juggle work, kids, out of town? You've got things going on and you're sitting in Tulsa, Oklahoma at a soccer tournament.
Well, there's this thing called the internet, first of all, and it's unique, and it provides this connection back to Amarillo, whether I like it or not, and the cell phone that I carry. And I'm, by the way, probably a cell phone nut. Like I've always, when these smartphones first came back out really early on, man, I was really into it. We can talk about that later, but so I always take my laptop with me, and it connects to my local office, and I'm usually just available. And sometimes you work nights at home to get your last little piece done. You just make it work, and it's not always fun, and sometimes it's frustrating, but it's just part of it for now. So, and I'm sure you guys get the calls at 9:00 at night. Hey, what's going on with my house? Is it ever going to sell? Or I found the house I'm going to buy. When can we see it? And you're like, I don't know. I'm just now, heading to bed. So
yes.
Can we talk tomorrow?
Well, and I don't know if you've noticed an uptick in our market. I think Tara and I have, and it's not from any data or looking at numbers. It's just from how busy all of a sudden we've become, and buyers coming out of the woodworks.
Sure.
And, getting up here at 7:30 in the morning, getting home at night at 8:30, 9:00 at night, after showing new clients, something like that. So it just feels like our market is in an uptick.
Yeah, I think for me, we, first of the year, first quarter was a little slower traditionally than what we're used to. And you can attribute that to a lot of things, higher prices and I think interest rates. And then I'm not sure everybody was ready, but seller concessions are back. So you're seeing that introduced into the market, and sellers didn't like that at all, right? I mean, they wanted to fight that. And so things were just a little slower. But for me, mid-April, there was a dramatic shift for me. And so, I left town Friday afternoon, late Friday afternoon, to go to a wedding in Austin for the weekend, and, check my email. It was cleared and done, and came home Sunday, and there was 300 emails. So, there was a lot of business in there, and so yeah, things are picking up.
Yes,
definitely.
It's good for our market. I brought this little thing. You probably know what one of those are.
Yeah,
I'd heard that's one of your favorite tools of the trade. That's not going to be near as good as the one that you have.
This is the Bosch. Yeah. This is a laser measurer. I use the Disto. I believe it's the X6.
Nice.
It's very nice. It's got a camera on it. You can see for a long time. Shoots up to 300 feet. It's essential for any person who is going to measure property for whatever reason, or I actually use it in a lot of other applications at the house. My wife's like, we're getting curtains. I'm like, no, we aren't. And she's like, yes, we are. And then we have to use the laser to figure out how tall her curtains are going to be.
There you go.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I recommend this for anybody. You can go get one at Home Depot, or you can shop online, and you can spend as much as you want or as little as you want. But yeah, I was saying, I'm unfortunately sort of a gadget guy. We're talking about how long I've been in the business. When we were getting going, the market everything was changing. So when I started with Bob doing appraisals, he was still taking like photographs with a regular 35 millimeter camera, and we were gluing those photos into the report. That's how things have changed.
Right.
And I talked him into getting a digital camera. And I mean, the funny part about that was the memory was so small and not good on the particular camera that he bought that you couldn't take more than like 30 photos. Well, if you do one house and drive by and take some comparable sales, you've maxed out the camera, and you got to go download it at the office before you can go to the next property. And it was a nightmare. But one of the funniest things I remember about the shift in technology in the real estate world was when we could start using Supra boxes. Well, everybody had these little fob keys that you could use to get into houses. And some realtors actually still use them because they don't use their smartphone for it or whatever.
Right.
But there was this unique phone. It was the Trio 650. The Trio 650 came out, and man, it was integrated with the MLS. It was integrated with Supra, and you could actually look up stuff on your phone, and you could actually open the lockbox without having to have the gadget. It was great. It was one of the best things that ever happened. And now everybody's using iPhones, but hey.
Exactly. Advances in technology for real estate.
It's insane. And if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, starting from those smartphones and actually having cell phones and digital photography and things like that to now, we're talking about artificial intelligence and all these different things that are creeping in, and where's that going to take us? You know what I mean? It's a whole new level of what's coming out.
Yeah,
So,
and I think you've talked about that some. The next generation of what's going to happen in real estate and in appraisals.
yeah,
Kind of going to the AI, and keeping up with that technology for the changes that are about to take place.
yeah. So if you think about it, out in the world, there's this abundance of data. How do people know how do people know how to use data? How do computers know how to use data? So the appraisal business, in a way, is sort of a dying field. It's like, well, the lender thinks they can use AI and they can use all the macro data and all the data that's out there, and they collect through appraisals in different ways, MLS systems and tax records and all these things. They can put together a good idea of what they think that property is worth before you ever go and look at it. So we're sort of the last defense against all of that, in a way. I'm going to drink coffee here. Sorry. We're sort of the last defense in that arena, in that we're able to go in and go, yeah, I know you think this property's worth $250,000, but did you know that the bathroom's completely ripped out? Because when we walk in it and it's gone, and you don't know it, and you've used artificial intelligence to put this number on it, and then the real number is not that number. So we're, in a way, the last defense, but I think technology is always looking for a way to push us out, if you will. So, that's something that you're just sort of up against, and you have to figure out how to create your value to the transaction in that. And that's what we try to do really hard. So
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. All right. Final question.
Okay.
What is the craziest thing that has ever happened to you while on the job?
There's been a whole lot of crazy stuff. I think, I always think about inspections, because when you head out to a property, you never know what you're going to get. I remember, is it okay to tell a couple?
Of course.
Sure. So I remember during COVID, right after we had all gotten locked down and this and that. And so I was regularly kind of carrying a mask around, to do inspections and that kind of stuff. And I had this guy call me, and he said, well, actually, the bank called and said, would you go do this appraisal? This guy's wanting to remodel this house. And I said, sure, yeah. So we go out and meet the guy there, and he goes, did you bring a mask? I said, yeah, I brought a mask. He goes, you're going to need it. I said, okay. So we he opens up the door to the house, and it is destroyed. I mean, there had been dogs that had lived there, and the owner had passed away. And that place was covered in feces, the entire floor. You couldn't see the floor. The cats had pooped on the counters. Some of the worst stuff you can imagine, some of the worst smells you can imagine. And he wanted to get a mortgage on that and, just do a little remodel. And I called the bank and said, hey, this one doesn't quite work. I think he needs to do a little cleaning up before we go any further. So that's like an extreme example of something that I've seen, that's happened. And then I've seen some really amazing luxury properties and things that you just like, I can't believe they spent the money to do this particular thing in this house. And then there's always the, running into a strange animal on site or something like that. I was in Paramount a couple years ago, and the house was empty, and so I wasn't thinking too much about it, and walked into the backyard, and there was 6 fox just staring at me like, "What are you doing in our backyard?" And I'm like, "I don't know what I'm doing here. I probably ought to get out of here." So, that kind of stuff happens. Probably the craziest thing that's happened to me is there have been times when I've gone out on appraisals. I've always had the people, like kids sleeping in the bed or somebody sleeping in a bed while you're trying to do the inspection, and you turn the light on and, "Whoa, sorry, didn't mean to wake you up." That happens. But, I've had women answer the door without clothes on. I've had all kinds of crazy stuff. So you never know what you're going to get out there. It's always a good it's always not a good experience. I won't say it like that, but it's always interesting. There's always something unique that's going to happen when you're headed to a property, and sometimes people don't know you're coming, although they should, because you've set an appointment. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was all with confirmed appointments, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, no, we confirm every appointment. Sometimes that happens with tenants being in houses, or spouses not telling other spouses people are coming. I don't know how it all goes down, but yeah, I've had women invite me into the home, and I'm like, I think I'll just work outside for a minute, let you get gathered up, and figured out so we can move on. So
you figured it out.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Jeremy, I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge and your expertise. We really appreciate you.
No, thank you for having me. I love trying to be an ambassador for the industry, and just being, a go-to person, and hopefully giving your listeners some kind of good knowledge out of this. I don't know how that will work, but
there's a ton of good knowledge in there.
Sure.
So we appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next time on Talking Texas Real Estate.